alaikum, namaste, sastriyakal. My name is Farheen Khan and you're watching the Azeeza show. This week we're actually going to be speaking about a topic that often doesn't get spoken about, as you know, many topics do on our show. And this one is actually called Free the Flow. So we're talking about menstrual health and menstrual equity. And with me in studio is Halima Al-Hatimy. Thank you so much for being here, Halima.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. So Halima, I know we've only recently had a chance to meet, and I mean, I think the work you're doing is quite remarkable. So maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about who you are and kind of what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a community health activist. I started FemCare back in 2015. It was just a grassroots project. We were just gathering donations from members of the community and distributing pads and tampons to homeless women, girls, and trans persons who needed them. So we assembled kits and distributed them on the streets, and then we took some of whatever was left and distributed them to shelters and other community agencies. We had such a positively positively overwhelming response. There was like about maybe $4,000 to $5,000 worth of donations that we garnered the first time we did it, and I thought, wow, there's got to be a need for this here, obviously, because the community just really came together to support the cause. So they actually asked me if I was going to do something like that again. Initially, it was just something I wanted to do for International Women's Day, but then it kind of just snowballed into what it is now. And so now FemCare has become a registered nonprofit organization in Canada. We registered it in March 2018. And so our focus now we're still doing the menstrual drives, but our focus at this point is to push for menstrual equity on a systemic level. So advocating for policy development, advocating for research to be done around this issue, and then also educating the public and promoting menstrual equity and menstrual health in the community. So that's what we're focusing on right now.
So I want to ask you two things. Well, first of all, what does menstrual equity mean? I think that's important for the audience. So what does that mean? Like, when you say menstrual equity, what do you mean?
It's ensuring, and so from FemCare's perspective, it's ensuring that all who menstruate experience optimal health and wellness and have access to the products and the supplies and facilities that they need to maintain menstrual hygiene management during that time of month.
And why is that so important?
Oh, several reasons. You know, from a clinical perspective, not being able to maintain menstrual hygiene can lead to all sorts of health issues, such as like skin issues, vaginal infections, could lead to bladder infections. From a socioeconomic perspective, it actually we've seen time and time again that the inability to maintain menstrual hygiene management has actually caused women and girls and trans persons who menstruate to not be able to go to school or maintain employment, And then there's the shame and the humiliation, especially if you're a homeless woman. You're already dealing with so much stress, and then the additional stress of not being able to maintain menstrual hygiene. That For sure, and then there's the cost factor too, right? Not everybody can afford to necessarily buy pads. I mean, there's so many sort of factors that come into play, right, when it comes to, and so it's also about making sure that they're affordable or that they're accessible, right? Definitely,
to people as well, for sure.
Definitely.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you. And I mean, I knew the answer to that, but I just wanted to make sure that, you know, as you know, our audience is kind of clear on what those terms actually mean.
For sure,
And question for you then. So here's tell us why you care about this issue, Halima.
I experienced period poverty myself. When I got my first period around 11, 12 years old, and I remember my father shamed and humiliated me in front of the entire family. I didn't understand these bodily changes that were happening, and I didn't really have any support. My mom had mental health issues, so she couldn't really sit down and have that conversation with me. My father used to use my period as a way to punish me and as a way to hurt me and control me, so he would withhold money that I needed to buy pads, and so oftentimes I had to panhandle or had to ask friends, to lend me these pads, and it was really challenging because they didn't give them away in school, didn't give them away in the food bank either. So I had that experience myself. And then when I was 15 years old, my father abducted me and my mother to Kenya, and at that time I was almost married off as a child bride. I managed to escape, collaborated with the Canadian government, organized my escape back to Canada. But during that time, I also didn't have access to pads because it was really expensive, and pads were a luxury that were only afforded by women in the middle and upper classes. And when I came back to Canada, I dealt with abuse. The guardian that I was living with at the time, I was 17 years old, went through severe abuse in their household, so I had to move out on my own, and I had to go hungry. At least once a month I had to go hungry so that I could afford these products, right? And I used to have really heavy periods as well, so I needed more than the average girl. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I managed to turn it into a source of strength at this point, a source of power. But yeah, it was very challenging at the time. And I realized that there was an overlap, like living in a third world country and seeing that only women in the middle and upper class could afford these products, and then coming here to Canada, a first world country, and seeing the same issue here. Right. And so when I read an article when I was about 25 years old. I was supposed to be working on an assignment, and I was procrastinating on Facebook instead, but it was a good thing because I came across this article on period poverty, and I was like, oh, this is like an easy fix. Why is this even an issue? And then I thought, what I went through, it wasn't just unique to me. It was a systemic issue, and it wasn't just an issue that was unique to women in third world countries.
No, for sure.
You're experiencing it right here in Canada, right? One of the richest countries in the world. And so that's when I started the drive. I didn't really have a vision of where it was going to go, but it just kind of, I really say that the community came together and really built FemCare and brought it to where it is right now. I kind of followed the community's direction because they kept asking for more. They kept asking for, for our work. And so I just kept doing based on what the community wanted. And now I have more of a vision of where this organization is going.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And can you tell us about some of the, I know you mentioned in Hamilton you've been able to make some headway, so what does that like?
So we came in December 2018, December 10th, 2018, a motion was passed. We presented to the Board of Health, and they passed a motion to study the feasibility of funding menstrual products for low income and homeless persons who menstruate. I recently met with Public Health to consult them. They're doing an environmental scan right now, so they've consulted all the different sectors on a municipal level, and so the environmental scan is almost complete, and now we're going to be looking at what implementation will look like. So we're looking at submitting the report to council, and then based on the findings from that report and the recommendations, council is going to decide how these products will be distributed. And so they're also working in collaboration with the Public and Catholic School Board, which I think is critical.
That's wonderful.
Right? Yeah. It's super important, and so we've been really successful at that. We have our menstrual health forum coming up on Monday, where we're going to be talking about how do we move beyond the municipal level to ensure menstrual equity for all here in Canada. So we've also done some advocacy on the provincial level, pushing the government to apply a gender equity lens to how resources are distributed through social assistance programs. And then we also recently met with the Minister of Status of Women, Minister Miriam Monsef, and her policy advisor, and we had a conversation about looking at how do we implement policy on a federal level. So recently in the United States Congress passed the Menstrual Equity for All Act in 2017. It was passed in New York, and so it ensures that exactly what the title says, menstrual equity for everybody, regardless of how much money they make. And so we're lobbying the government of Canada to do the same thing here, because we really believe that this is going to take a multi-level policy framework because of how complicated this topic is. All different sectors have to come together and work together in collaboration to ensure its success. So the campaign is called Free the Flow.
That's excellent. I love that. So question for you. How we actually last week we had one of the MPPs from the NDP, Jill Andrews, on the show, and she was talking about some of the challenges that they're having at the Legislative Assembly, in particular, with respect to cuts to social services and stuff like that. So how has it been, like the response that you've gotten from the provincial government so far?
So the provincial government, when we presented in January, we got really warm reception.
Okay.
But now we're just waiting to see how they implement the recommendations that were brought forth
Right.
In January.
Okay.
We are still having conversations with the provincial government, though, but they haven't. There hasn't been much movement yet, so there's not much to talk about right now. But in fairness, we only stared talking to them in January.
Okay.
So
that's fair.
and this
So you're
kind of
still-
stuff takes time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So what would, let's talk about the federal changes that you're proposing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what would that look like? Are we talking, basically ensuring that everyone can have access to free pads in certain public spaces? What does that mean?
Yeah, so, I was having this conversation with the Hamilton Public Health as well recently when I met with them. And so the policy essentially would be categorizing menstrual products as a medical necessity, rather, because right now they're still considered a luxury.
Yes.
In the United States, here in Canada, other parts of the world, still considered a luxury.
Which is ridiculous, right?
Absolutely
like, it's absolutely
bizarre.
ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely absurd.
It's a basic right, you know, and something that every woman requires. There's no question about why it's a luxury.
And the fact that we've allowed this to carry on for so long is also, but a lot of that has to do with the stigma associated with menstruation. We can't talk about it, so because if we can't talk about it, we can't advocate for better policies. Right. So that's the big thing that we're trying to push is for the provincial government to categorize menstrual products as a medical necessity.
Right.
Because then, for example, for populations like the working poor, who are often sort of often left in the margins, it would ensure that they're able to access these products through OHIP, for example. That's something that we're discussing. We don't know what the challenges will be around that, but just proposing that idea and then having a conversation from there. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break.
Sounds good.
And then we'll be back. Okay. All right, we'll be back right after this. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Azeeza show. I'm just here with Halima, and we're talking about your organization, FemCare, Menstrual Equity, and menstrual health. So, before the break, we were talking about just sort of the work that's being done so far with FemCare, and I know the word shame kind of came up, right? So, I really wanted to talk about, first, are there the importance of kind of talking about your stories and what's that experience been like, and how is that sort of supporting this idea of sort of challenging the stigma?
Yeah, I think the shame associated with menstruation is obviously it has a lot to do with just like the history of misogyny and sexism and violence against women, right? So just this being a bodily function that's associated with women's bodies already in itself creates, sets the stage for that shame and that humiliation, right? And so I think that the only way that we can start resolving this issue at this point is we need to start being bold and courageous enough to come out and tell our stories, because in telling our stories, we heal ourselves and we heal each other. And this is really a time for healing, because even a lot of women who are older than me or women in my generation, they still have a lot of pain associated with that they've been carrying around for years, that they haven't really let out and released and healed from, right? So I think that it's more than just about getting these products out to those who need them. It's about preventing this sort of pain from happening in the future, but also healing some of the traumas from the past, healing that now so we can really move forward. Yeah, and I think, if one of the things I was just thinking about, there's a lot of women, including myself, who, have had so many issues when it comes to our own experience, right, with periods. And it's just to varying degrees, right? But it's just it almost feels like there's some sort of a connection in terms of women's emotions, our sort of traumatic experiences, and where we hold it in our body. 100%. So I live with two menstrual related conditions. One's called endometriosis. So it's an inflammatory condition. It's characterized as painful period cramps, excruciatingly. I've ended up in the ER having to get IV morphine because the pain has been so bad. And then I also live with another condition called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So that's a menstrual related mental health issue.
Right.
And so almost every month I start to get suicidal thoughts or suicidal ideation. And I also live with post-traumatic stress disorder. I find that my flashbacks get worse around that time. I live with anxiety and depression. Those also get worse. And I also have chronic injuries from multiple car accidents that I've been in, and those also get worse. And so I've actually spoken to my physicians about this, multiple physicians, asked them, I said, look, I don't know what it is, but every time I'm about to get my period, like 3 to 5 days before, and at least the first 3 or 4 days of my period, my life's an absolute nightmare. All the pre-existing conditions that I have, they all worsen around that time. And they're like, you know, you're actually not the first woman who's reported this to us, but we don't know what the answer is. And I'm like, okay, well, are you going to investigate anything? Like, you know what I mean? Like, are you going to? There's obviously an issue here, so there's potential for research. Why aren't we conducting the research? Is it just this like continued failure of the medical system to serve the needs of women and to promote women's health? Is it like, because throughout history we've seen that the medical system has failed women and hasn't really done the best job that it could do, to protect women's health and to preserve it. So really it's about it. Everybody's got to be galvanized around this. Everybody, the community, healthcare professionals, politicians, you know, teachers, lawyers, like everybody's got to get involved in this conversation.
Absolutely. So I know that I was watching. I haven't had a chance to watch the film yet, but I was hearing about this Academy Award that was won by a film called Period. How do you feel about that?
I was really excited about that to see like an Academy Award being won over a documentary around periods. I'm like, this is monumental. This is
exactly.
Right,
like,
and
wow.
It just really reinforced that, you know, the work that we're doing is just so in line with what's happening in the bigger scheme of things, So that was really exciting for me, and I haven't watched it yet myself, but I do intend on watching it after our menstrual forum. Once I get a chance to breathe,
for sure. No, that's great. I mean, and I think really what it comes down to is, like, you know, from what I understand, the film is about this woman who's trying to, you know, basically do what you're doing, right? Is to come up with a solution on how to make pads more accessible to women in third world countries, particularly I think in India in this case. So that's a really great, you know, story, right? Of like, you know, struggle and trying to kind of overcome obstacles, which is pretty neat as well.
And what's really exciting about the time that we're doing this in is that, you know, social media has made it so easy to connect with people from all over the world. So we've been having conversations with menstrual activists in the Middle East, you know, in India. We've been having conversations with menstrual activists in the United States. So we're already starting to build those relationships and you know, talking about those collaborations in the future. So it's a really exciting time, and it's a time for healing. It's a time for healing, and it makes all the pain that I've gone through worth it. You know, it does, because I can say, okay, well, at least I've turned it into something positive and something that is going to empower people for generations to come.
Absolutely.
You know, and everybody's being impacted by this movement. Even men, like, you know, a lot of men have been so supportive of this. That's great. I actually had we had one guy who works at a real estate company out in Hamilton, Ambitious Realty. He's one of the brokers there. He actually took a selfie with he was laying on like a pack of, I think, 25 pads, and he took a selfie of it, and that was all over the breakfast television interview that we did, you know. And so it's just that's what it is. It's about breaking the stigma by just doing it, just getting in there and just doing it. And so it's been good. It's been really good.
That's really great. I'm glad to hear that. I know, like, having my own health issues this past year, it's been really terrible, and I can't imagine what I would have been like if I couldn't have access to those pads, right? But, you know, and I'm obviously not the only woman who's had to deal with them. Obviously there's lots of other women, but it's just definitely something that really hits home for me. So question for you, for women who are actually dealing with this issue, right, of period poverty, like, what advice would you give? How, you know, can women sort of access pads the way that they need to? How do
so,
they?
So a lot of the reading I've done, a lot of women are too ashamed to ask for, and especially trans people as well. It's extremely challenging for them because right. So don't be afraid to ask for what you need at these community agencies and these shelters, because even if they don't have them, it continues to reinforce that there is a need, which gives us ammo to continue pressuring the government to implement sustainable systemic solutions to this issue. So don't be afraid to ask for those products if you need them. We're still doing our menstrual drives. We've expanded to 13 cities in Ontario now.
Excellent.
So we're still doing them, and there are other organizations and just community groups that are not registered that are also doing it. So there's a lot of people working on this issue, so they're not alone. We hear them. I was there myself.
Yes.
There's no shame in it. If you need the help, ask for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, I think it's you know, we were talking about earlier before the break, like part of it's challenging too, because then if you don't have access, then there's so many things that you're limited from doing, right? Like school, work, all of these things. So it's just like, you know, if you don't ask, then you're really not functional otherwise. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's such a basic necessity that you need.
Exactly. And there's been so many times where I've had to leave school early because either my cramps were so bad and they didn't have Advil for me at school, right? Or I didn't have enough pads to last me throughout the day, so I had to leave home early. I had to leave school early to go home because I stained my clothes.
Yeah, I hear
that's not a reason for a girl to have to go home.
No, for sure.
Yeah. From school, that's unacceptable.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
So that's great. So I mean, I wonder how, like, you've talked about some of the men and the reception that you've gotten so far, right? Has there been any kind of a backlash or
certainly. There's always backlash. I just don't pay much attention to it anymore because I've been an activist my entire life in the public eye for the past about 5 years now. I've been an activist in the public eye, but I've been an activist my whole life. You're always going to deal with pushback. You're always going to deal with people that don't understand the topic but still feel like they have a lot to say. I don't really pay them much attention, and I think because I don't see that pushback as much as I see the receptive.
That's great. That's great. And what would you, I mean, I think part of it is like, how do you become obviously you're doing the work, right? But if somebody else wanted to join you in this process, like what does your team look like? Who are the people who are helping you through this process?
So right now we have 7 members on our board. Still looking for more. We have so much work ahead of us, so we're still looking for volunteers. We're still, looking for board members. So if people are interested, we're going to have our website up soon, but they can go to our Facebook page or our Instagram page to send us a message, and we need volunteers. We're trying to spread the menstrual drives as well throughout the country. So if there are people, regardless of where you are, if you want to help by setting up a drive in your city, let us know. We'll send you the information. We'll help you set up, and I'll take it from there. We got this thing down to an art now, so it's pretty easy at this point.
Awesome. And do you have any last minute thoughts? We're almost about to wrap.
I'm really happy. I'm really looking forward to what's ahead. I'm grateful for all the support that I've been getting from the community, the hard work that the board has been, FemCare's board has been doing, the support that I've been getting from government officials, people who are working within the school system. It's been great. The reception has been wonderful, and so I think just let's keep doing what we're doing. Let's keep telling our stories. Let's keep healing. Let's keep doing the work and moving forward, because we have a really bright future ahead. Really bright. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
I know that there are many women in the audience who are hearing you today and saying thank you. So
that's great, and that's probably going to make me cry, but I'm going to wait until we're done recording.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for being on the show, watching the show again today, and thank you to Halima for being here. I just want to take a moment and say, you know what, sometimes it's important to have these conversations, especially the ones that affect us so intimately. So until next time, see you later, and we'll see you next week. Take care.